Hello everyone and welcome to another Endgame episode with Coach B and MasterChess.com. In this video, we're going to take a look at the positions that involve a rook and pawn on the 6th rank versus rook, where the defending king is not in front of the pawn. As we will see in this video, if the defending king is not able to get in front of the pawn, then he's going to lose most of those games. However, correct play will be required by the player with the advantage. So let's take a look at the correct play of some of these important positions. In this first position, it's black to move, and we can see that his king is cut off by the rook on e1, and he's not able to get in front of the pawn. Therefore, he's going to lose this game. Here, with black to move, he's going to move the rook to e8. This is the best play by black. He's challenging white's rook and fights for the e file. Here, white cannot trade the rook as black is going to achieve a draw. After rook takes on e8 and king takes on e8, this is a drawn position. After king to f5 and king to f7, white is not able to promote his pawn and stalemate will be achieved. Therefore, white has to respond differently. If he checks the black king on d1, well, after king to e6, black achieved the draw again. From here, the game could continue with, let's say, king to g5. After rook to e1 check, king to h6, king takes on f6, black reached the draw. And coming back after rook to d1 check and king to e6, if instead of moving the king to g5, white will check the king again with rook to e1. After king to f7, rook takes e8 and king takes e8, a drawing position has been achieved again. But coming back from the very beginning, after rook to e8, white can win this game with correct play. If here white had the move and there were no rooks on the board, this would have been a winning pawn endgame. Therefore, the correct play here is rook to e5. This still keeps black's king away from going in front of the pawn, and here black cannot exchange the rook. After rook takes on e5 and white captures back, after king to e8, king to e6, this is a winning pawn endgame. After king to f8 and pawn to f7, the black king has to move out and then white will be able to move in and then promote the pawn and win the game from here. Coming back after rook to e5, if black does not capture the rook, let's say he's going to move rook to h8. Well, now after king to g5, rook to g8 check, king to h6, rook to f8, king to g7, the black rook is chased away. After rook to a8, pawn moves to f7, king to d6, rook to e2, rook to b8. There's nothing that black can do. White will promote the pawn, and then black will have to sacrifice the rook and white will win the game. So as we've seen in this position, always be aware of the pawn endgame that will result after the exchange of the rooks, as that will be a key element in winning these type of positions. This next position is another typical position where the defending king was cut off and he's not able to get in front of the pawn. Sometimes he's left behind and he's going to attack the pawn from the rear. This position is actually easily won by white. Here, the correct play is simply moving the rook to h8. In this position, black cannot capture the pawn. If he does take the pawn, let's say rook takes on d6, well, after rook to h5 check, black is forced to let the rook go and white will capture the rook and the game is lost. However, coming back from the very beginning, after rook to h8, if black does not take the pawn, the only thing that he's got is rook to a7 check, and after the pawn pushes to d7, there's not much that black can do. After something like king to d5, king to e8, rook to a8 check, the pawn will promote, and now black will have to sacrifice the rook, and white wins the game. This next position, it's another position where black fails to get the king in front of the pawn, therefore he's going to lose this game. All he's got here is king to e5 attacking the pawn and the rook, but after rook to b6 still guarding the pawn, black is totally lost. All he's got is rook to a8 check. After king to f7, rook to a7 check, the pawn will simply march forward and there's nothing that black can do to prevent white from promoting the pawn. His king is cut off and cannot help. After something like rook to a8, the pawn will simply march forward and then black will have to sacrifice the rook and white will win the game. And this next position is another very common position which looks very similar to the long distance checks defense. The defending king is on the short side of the board, while his rook is on the long side of the board. However, here with white to move, white is able to still win this game due to the fact that he has the rook on d6 and he is able to use it to shelter from the checks. So after king to e8, rook to a8 check and rook to d8, blocking the check of the black rook, white is able to win this game. And now if black moves the rook to a7, well, this win is going to be very quick. After rook to d7 check, black is forced to exchange the rooks and white will be able to promote his pawn. So coming back, a better play for black here will be moving the rook backwards to a1. After this, white will move the rook to b8. And now there's only three main tries that black has. Moving the rook to e1, attacking the pawn, or he can move the king to f6, attacking the pawn with the king, or the last reply he has is moving the rook to a7, trying to block the 7th rank, not allowing white's king to get out. Well, none of these tries will be successful. Let's take a look at this first one where the rook is on a7. If the rook moves to a7, well, here white will be able to push the pawn to e7, and now all he's got is attacking the pawn with the king to f6. But after rook to b6, the king has to move away. After king to g7, the rook will come behind the pawn, and now the white's king is free to go attack black's rook. After something like rook to a8, king to d7, rook to a7 check, king to d6, rook to a6 check, king to d5, guarding the rook. After rook to a5 check, the king can go to c4, and those series of checks will stop. After rook to a4, king to b5, there are no more checks. After rook to a8, the pawn will promote and white will win the game. Coming back from the beginning, the other try that he has here is rook to e1, attacking the pawn from behind. But after this, white will simply march the pawn to e7. After rook to d1, trying to stop white's king from coming out, rook to d8 challenges the rook, and now black's rook will have to leave the file. So after rook to f1, king to d7, white's king is able to come out, and after rook to d1, king to c6, white is simply going to march the king towards the rook, and those checks will eventually stop. And now after the rook is attacked and rook to e1, the pawn will promote and white will win the game. And coming back, the only other try that black has is moving the king to f6, attacking the pawn with the king. Well, after pawn to e7, rook to e1, rook to b6 check attacks the king will have to go to g7, and after rook to d6, let's say rook to e2, king to d8, there's only two tries that black has, either king to f7 or rook to a2. After king to f7 here, white will simply retreat the rook to d1, threatening to check the king on f1 and promoting the pawn. And if here black does take the pawn on e7, well, after rook to f1 check, the rook will be lost. King to e6, rook to e1 check, king to d6, the rook will capture the other rook on e7, and white will win the game. And coming back, we looked at king to f7. However, I do want to mention that moving the rook to a2 to start a series of checks will not work, because white will simply be able to promote the pawn right away and win the game this way. Here, black will have to sacrifice the rook with rook to a8, king to d7, and rook takes on e8. And after white captures back, black will lose this game again. So as we've seen in these type of positions, if the defending king is not able to get the king in front of the pawn, he's going to have a hard time getting a draw. So if the filler or defense cannot be reached, the only defense system left is the long distance checks defense. But even in that setup, white was able to win if he was able to use the rook to shelter from the checks and also reach the 8th rank. The only way to reach a draw when the pawn is on the 6th rank and the opponent's rook can shelter the king from the long distance checks is if the defending side also has control of the 8th rank. And this next position is very similar to the previous position. However, there is one big difference. White's king cannot reach the 8th rank as black rook covers that rank, and this is enough to allow black to achieve a draw with correct play. So here, after rook to d8 and rook to a7 check, king to e8, king to f6, pawn to e7, rook takes e7, a draw is achieved. Coming back after king to f6, if white doesn't push the pawn to e7 here, another try will be rook to d7, but after rook to a8 check, rook to d7, black is able to sacrifice the rook, and after white captures back, black will be able to capture the pawn and reaching a draw this way. And coming back after king to e8 and king to f6, the only other try that white has is moving the rook to d6, guarding the pawn, but this also loses very quick. After rook to e7 check, the king moves away, black is able to capture the pawn on e6, reaching a draw. Coming back from the very beginning, we look at rook to d8 and then rook to a7 check, and then king to e8. Another try is rook to d7. After this, black is simply going to go cover the 8th rank again, not letting the white king get to the 8th rank. And this is all he needs to do to achieve a draw. The best try that white has here is moving the rook to d6. And here, black has to be super careful. He cannot leave the 8th rank. If he allows white to get the king to the 8th rank, he's going to lose the game. The only drawing move here is king to g6. After this, there's not much that white has. After something like rook to d7, king will move to g7. Rook to c7, king to g6. Keeping a control of the 8th rank, and black is going to be able to achieve a draw. And coming back, if instead of moving the rook to d7, white tries king to d7, well here after king to f6, black is able to achieve a draw again. After something like pawn to e7 check, the king will march to f7, and the only try that white has here is rook to a6. Again, black cannot take the white rook as white will promote with check, so after rook to b8, rook to a7, rook to e8, there is nothing that white can do. King to d6 and then rook to b8, repeating the position, and a draw has been achieved. And coming back here, we looked at the only drawing move as king to g6. But I do want to show you what happens if here black leaves the 8th rank and why he's going to lose this game. So if here black moves the rook to a1 instead, well now the white king will be able to reach the 8th rank with king to e8. And rook to a8 check, it's too late. After rook to d8 blocking the check, rook to a6, the pawn will march to e7, and this is a winning game for white, as we've seen in the previous position. If black tries king to f6, I'm just going to fast forward through the winning move. After king to f8, rook to e6, the pawn will promote, then white will win the game. Or if instead of moving the king to f6, if rook to a7 is played here, we also saw this winning sequence with rook to b8. If king to f6, the rook will check the king and then go behind the pawn and slowly get the king to chase the rook away and then promote the pawn and win the game. So as we saw in this position, this is the only drawing chance that black has, but it only can be achieved if he has control of the 8th rank and he has the long distance checks defense. Now in these type of positions, the position of the rook is very important, and I want to close this video with another drawing position which is a little bit easier to be achieved due to the poor position of white's rook. So in this last position, the defending king is on the short side of the board, but his rook is not on the furthest file away. Well, even though he doesn't have the correct setup for the long distance checks defense, he's still able to draw due to the poor position of white's rook, who is not able to shelter its kings from the checks. So here, with black to move, he is able to get a draw. The correct play is rook to g7 check. From here, if the king moves to e8, rook to g8 check. If white tries to prevent the checks from happening, let's say king to f7, blocking the checks, well, the rook will simply retreat to g1. And now there's only two plays that white has, either pushing the pawn to d7 or moving the king back to e8, trying to reach the Lucena position. If white moves the pawn to d7, well now after king to c7, there's nothing that white can do to prevent black from getting a draw. After something like king to e7 and rook to e1 check, the king will have to move away and the pawn will be captured, reaching a draw. Using the rook as a shelter does not work here because black can simply capture the rook on e6. After white captures back, the king will reach d8, and now the only way to hold on to the pawn is on d6, which is stalemate, and therefore black achieved the draw again. And coming back, if instead of pushing the pawn here to d7, if white moves the king to e8, well the series of checks will come again with rook to g8, king to f7, rook to g1, and white cannot make any progress. I also want to mention that another try that white has is maybe moving the rook to h8, after king to c6, moving the rook to d8 to defend the pawn. But even this is unsuccessful. After rook to e1, cutting off white's king from reaching the pawn, there's really nothing that white can do. Moving the king to f8, it's not going to make any improvement. Black is simply going to move the rook to e2, keeping the king far away. So eventually the pawn will have to push. After pawn moves to d7, king to c7, attacking the rook and the pawn, and now black achieved the draw. The rook has to move away. The only try that he has is rook to c8 check, but here black can take the pawn, reaching a draw as well. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video, and I encourage you to visit my website masterchess.com where you can practice these positions against the computer. If you liked my video, please subscribe and don't forget to check out my new website, masteryourchess.com, where you can learn, practice, test, and master your chess knowledge.